There are many things in Elden Ring that have been secreted away, veiled, and shrouded. The reason for their concealment ranges from hiding a god-slaying power that could threaten the prevailing order, sealing the means to ascend to godhood to monopolize the position, or merely hiding truths that are so hideously inconvenient that they are almost not worth knowing. Nightreign offers us a healthy glimpse under the veil in many instances, such as the function and purpose of the divine tower trees as a sort of divine tree antenna to harness the benediction of the greater will, likely in order to form or power portions of the Elden Ring, and other mysteries that link together cultures that have long been suspected of being connected. And one of the all-time biggest mysteries of Elden Ring is the nameless Eternal City. Its missing Nox, missing petrified bodies, missing Dragonkin soldier, missing mimics, missing structures, missing crypt throne and giant skeleton, as well as the uniquely destroyed scape of the city and the presence of the Eternal City-coded walking mausoleums, which are said to house Marika's unwanted children and are surrounded by special knights, and of course, how this city may once have fit in the void we see in Leyndell. So many mysteries for this one small place, and all of these mysteries are given new tantalizing leads with the introduction of the Shrouded Eternal City, Noklateo. Nok likely serves as the base morpheme shared across all three cities. We can likely glean information about these cities and their relationship to one another through both the first and last part of their names. Like many things in Elden Ring, I believe these names share aspects from different languages, such as Greek and Latin. Nokstella potentially translates to Nightstar or Star of the Night. Nokron, where the Fingerslayer blade is, may be Strength of the Night, and Noklateo potentially translates fittingly to that which lies hidden in night, or concealed night, or the hidden night city. All of these are more than fitting, given the Nox worship of the stars and moon, as well as their reverence of the night sky and Lord of Night. While Nokstella is significantly larger than Nokron, Noklateo is vaster still, extravagant, and by far the largest of the eternal cities from Elden Ring. If we have a look at the nameless Eternal City and where it breaks and compare that to the ground above, we can see the alignment and shape of Noklateo fitting quite comfortably in the sunken lower quarters of Leyndell. There is debris behind the city consistent with both the scape and the damage to the nameless Eternal City. Nokstella is nestled by Raya Lucaria and by extension the Carians, just like Nokron is nestled by Celia, which shares Eternal City archaeology and even a secret crypt throne and Nox. So then, having the nameless Eternal City situated by Lower Leyndell, which is very reminiscent of Celia and the Carians, fits very neatly, much like the presence of the Carian carpets appearing in a secretive nod just outside of Leyndell's walls by Melina's cage and the Forbidden Lands. Another compelling point is the unique presence of the graves we see throughout the lands between in both Lower Leyndell and only in the Shrouded Eternal City. The placement would put the crypt throne approximately over the lower part of Upper Leyndell, putting the entrance to this grand city here, right by the entrance to this bottomless watery pit. It was difficult to tell which orientation this should have if or not it should line up with the entrance to the city, or if this wall was created at a later date to hide this void and Noklateo should line up with this gate exiting the upper city, or if it was something else entirely. But the fit, regardless, is very compelling. The way it fits with the nameless city and this area of Leyndell fits with the description of the city, which is described as a place that was once part of a greater whole. And you can really appreciate the separation in the sheer cutoff in the nameless city, the isolation of the void area in Leyndell, and the debris behind Noklateo. One of the most interesting pieces I have seen is that this would mean the Shrouded Eternal City's throne would almost exactly match up with this stylized crypt throne that is being struck by Gransax's bolt, which would also line up with the Greatree almost exactly and specifically where it's cracking. I also lined up this desolated tree with the Erdtree, and while the distance is difficult to determine with the tools I have now, it would at least somewhat align with the position of this city and this tree, to the Erdtree and this missing portion of Leyndell. Either way, this would put the Round Table Hold, where Recluse birthed the would-be Night Lord, in close proximity to this shrouded eternal city where we find the larval tier, which will be highly relevant for my following video. So before we explore the lore, let's have a look at the city itself. Noklateo is described as a lost city that was desolated in a single night and sealed underground, but recently resurfaced. The vast city, showing no signs of life, is brimming with curses and overrun by undead. The sole remains of those who sought the secret treasures said to be hidden in there. An object from an age-long past lies enshrined here. The means to duplicate any weapon. Or so it is said. I have long since believed that the nameless eternal city is the city of gold, given it once being a part of Leyndell. The city of gold and rainbows. It was here that the machinations of the eternal cities succeeded with the creation of their golden lord equivalents, and where the fruits of many moons of planning were harvested. I'll note on those many moons again soon. After all, the efforts of the eternal cities appear to be to mimic the capacity and power of gold, attempting to recreate the beings capable of being its vessel, as well as weapons that could harm those that could challenge their ambition, all necessary stepping stones over the many moons of planning their grand rebellion. This completeness of gold in comparison to the incomplete silver is a common theme we see throughout Elden Ring, with gold and silver being complementary to one another, but in the same way life and death are, silver missing something that only gold can achieve. Albinorix is an incomplete life form, while the life-gifted grace of gold are whole and complete, just like the golden amber egg being required for a perfect rebirth of the silver tears. We even see a progression from a silver cocoon larvae to a more colourful, mature and golden form in the malformed star. So to me, the nameless and vacant eternal city, being the one that has been seemingly erased and veiled having achieved its goals, fits perfectly with the treasures we find in Noklateo. But first, there is much more to see. The city is divided into 6 main parts. The first 3 parts are the Outer Canal, the Inner City, and the Grand Hall. The other 3 divisions are left, right, and centre. The Outer Canal, Inner City, and Grand Hall move from the lower Outer Canal to the Grand Hall, which is at the highest point of elevation. The left and right divisions are distinct from one another in that on the left-hand side there is a well to the lower sections. While the right-hand side noticeably does not have one. This could be due to the way that the city has been destroyed as per its description and the visual evidence. However, it may just be that this is the way the city is designed, as we see many water canals with the purest water I've ever seen in Elden Ring, perhaps suggesting a complicated design to purify the water that souls may be travelling within. This would also explain the extra canal on the left side, and extra buildings on the right side where the canal would be. This is similar to the other eternal cities, and their water flow manipulation, and complements the Tibia Mariner who guide the lost stars to Helfen's steeple by the water. The overall design itself is very reminiscent of Ballarat, though with a much cleaner water supply, perhaps a different part of the water purification process spanning the lands between. We find the secret treasure allowing item duplication and the silver tier on the left side of the city, while on the right-hand side we find an eternal city chest with a prize in it. The middle section is one giant canal of waterfalls that leads to the Grand Hall, wherein we can find the large skeleton on a crypt throne. The setup reminds me greatly of Mogwyn, with the central altar or throne room at the highest point in a similar design and manner. Also like the Sacred Woods. And this isn't the only crossover we see between the ancient dynastic ruins and the eternal cities. They are also linked by way of the belfries and their associated destinations, as well as the technology that takes us there, and the patriarchal figure that is on them. We also see the same vine motif we see all throughout the forts and castles of the lands between, as well as Faramazula itself, and a rich crossover of pillars and other items. I won't spend too long tumbling down that rabbit hole for the sake of brevity, so you can see these other videos here for now. While all of the architecture is essentially the same as the other eternal cities, there are some exceptions worth noting that tie this eternal city uniquely to other locations in the lands between, giving it singular importance. we find the mausoleum guards who protect grave sites and the walking mausoleum that house Marika's unwanted children, who behead themselves in order to maintain their vow to their master even after death. And interestingly on that point, all the fallen Hawk soldiers here are headless as well as the troll. Like the headless carrion troll we find guarding the belfry in the DLC, really bringing things quite full circle. We don't find any Nox, and perhaps that is due to the infestation of invaders, or this city's primary forces being the mausoleum guards who may be their Nox equivalent, as we also see them in the Nameless Eternal City, which also has no Nox. And just like the Nameless Eternal City as well, we see no Silver Tears, though we do find evidence of them. We find a Dragonkin soldier, and as another nod to this being the Golden Eternal City from where Marika the Eternal may have emerged, 2 Black Knife assassins who are Numen like Marika, and who are rumoured to share close ties to her. We also find a single Silver Tier mimic, specifically a troll like the one we find in Nokstella guarding the Fingerslayer blade. Lastly, and of the highest importance, throughout the game we see a depiction of a veiled woman extending her hands in various other poses, and holding jars often on churches throughout the lands between, while the statues donning the quatrefoil and shield have appeared in the other Eternal Cities, tying them to many other locations, and the Nox statues have appeared at the Church of Vows. We have only ever been given tiny hints at the association with this jar-wielding maiden to the Eternal Cities, through the treasure chests beneath crypt thrones, which show these very maidens in between depictions of the moon of Nokstella. With Noklateo, this all changed. Throughout Noklateo, we see new depictions of this woman with a jar front and center that are reminiscent of the many other veiled women statues in the base game. However, this one is entirely unique. To hammer home the connection, we also importantly see the very same jar woman from the churches in the lands between right here, in the walls and buildings of Noklateo. A further tie between the other jar-wielding maidens we see throughout the game, and, no doubt, a strong tie between their timeline and cultures. Marika's blessing, churches throughout the lands between, the plaques on the churches depicting a ritual with people melding into pillars. Catacombs and graves, the chests in the Nameless Eternal Cities, and now, within the Nameless Eternal Cities themselves. And just like these vestigial virgins, these shrine maidens, worthy of collecting and distributing the blessings of the Erdtree or Great Tree. We see another immensely important and mysterious artifact, the enthroned figure. In Noklateo, we find the crypt throne and associated giant skeleton missing from the Nameless Eternal City. And in every way, this design is the same as the others. The throne is elevated like the one in the bottom of Nokstella, and as such its throne is larger than the other in Nokstella, and the ones in Nokron and Celia. But aside from that, the figure has the same outfit, same coloured rings, still has a back brace and neck brace like the others, likely to keep the skeleton in position, and feet despite the prude positioning. But who is this figure? What is its purpose? Why is there no reference to them? And why is everyone around them petrified and wailing? Is it linked to why the Eternal Cities were destroyed and sealed underground? Well, perhaps we can be given insight through the 2 secrets of Noklateo. The prized legendary treasures the undead would-be raiders died trying to locate. There are 2 major rewards that you can receive from the Eternal City of Noklateo, and those are the Duplication Crypt, which is described as an object from an age-long past that lies enshrined here, the means to duplicate any weapon, or so it is said, and the favour of Noklateo, the Shrouded City, which will revive you once from the dead, bringing you back stronger than before, for a short time. The Eternal Cities were set on creating themselves a lord of their own, and just like the Nox themselves, what they did was done in secret, veiled, and out of the purview of the Greater Will. What this eventuated in was a betrayal of the Greater Will so profound that it retaliated by destroying their cities and taking their night sky with Astel. This is as described and seen in Nightreign, as well as the base game. Even the one that looks to have been assailed by an Astel appear to still have their sky. The exception to this is the Nameless Eternal City, whose night sky was presumably stolen by the Astel beneath Nokstella, which in this timeline may be still within the city it was laying waste to. After all, just like the missing statues, mimics, dragonkin, and buildings, this missing Astel and night sky are found here in Noklateo, by the missing crypt throne and skeleton. So what are the implications of the treasures found in this shrouded eternal city? What could an object capable of duplicating even legendary weapons, and a blessing capable of reviving someone more powerful each time they revive, have to do with the downfall of the eternal cities? What would such things have been used for, and why? We find this malformed star in the Grand Hall with the throned figure, and this room really allows you to see the rich colour of this living demonstration of the wisdom of stone. Even on its usually darkly cave-lit pincers, this interstellar lifeform appears to be used by the Greater Will to exact punishment, as it appears to have been used against both of the eternal cities, and potentially Elphael, which you can see in this video here. And if this eternal city was the nameless eternal city, then there may be precedent for this around Leyndell, as there does appear to be evidence of potential meteoric devastation outside of the capital. And above it, in the decimated Forbidden Lands, I would wager this damage would be about consistent with the total devastation we see in Noklateo, and the nameless eternal city. So if this is the case, what is it they did that was so profoundly upsetting to the prevailing order that it would shatter the Greater Will's control over the lands between, devastate the Erdtree, and condemn the nameless eternal city to a nightless sky in the underground? I think we can glean answers by examining the information regarding the goals and worship of the Nox, the two treasures of Noklateo, and the information given to us on the Primordial Night Lord's rune. Primordial Night Lord's rune, a thing with the properties of a great rune harboured by the Primordial Night Lord. The cutting-gifted tribe anticipated the coming night and spent many a moon planning its prevention, concluding that their only chance at success was to cheat a god. They had glimpsed what they should not, the very sin of the Erdtree. For their trespass, so were they punished. Perhaps it is by virtue of the nature of how shaman are cut with a whip to meld their flesh, or the skillful cutting of the Diminular village celebrants and Godskin apostle that invoked the thought. But my first thoughts when I heard the cutting-gifted tribe was the shaman and their ilk. Just as grafting requires the gift of cutting and stitching, so too does the act of grafting a tree, whose grafting cut looks like a very familiar symbol we have seen before. An item that brings the whipping of the shaman, lineage of their kind, connections to their future, capacity to create exceptional cutting implements, and the many moons, is Urumi, a whip which is actually described as having a cutting edge, created by the Nightfolk, who I believe are the Moonfolk, given the only place the Moonfolk are mentioned is the Lunar Isle by the original Carrion estate, and Urumi, which is the only item referencing the Nightfolk who are said to have bled silver long ago, is found at the Carrion Manor. By extension of this, they may very well be the lineage of the Carrions, just as the Silvertear Slimes of the Eternal Cities are file-named Marika's ancestors, and the misbegotten children of Radagon. I think the Nightfolk and Woodfolk complement one another just like the two separate villages of celebrants in Altus and Gelmir, or the two villages of Shaman in Bonnie Village and Shaman Village of the DLC, much like the spiritually attuned Carrion-coded Revenant and her close relationship with the Witch of the Woods. Fitting then that the hilt of Urumi is the same shape as a grafting cut, and Marika's rune. To bring this even more full circle, the pattern on the hilt of the black knives, which is hidden under a cloth, is eerily similar to the depiction on the young celebrants of the Windmill Village. And these black knives, who are scions of the Eternal Cities, are said to have close ties with and be of the same stock as Marika. If you want to know more about the relevance of this depiction on the celebrants to meta and the Gloam-eyed Queen, see this video here. But the relevance to me is important, as not only is Hailstar absolutely dripping in gloam, but his very form is strikingly similar to that of a black knife, with the fissure to contain the powers of destined death in one, and a fissure to contain the power strikingly similar to Marika's corpse and the rune of death in the other, as well as the knives even sharing the same amount of arms as Hailstar. And these knives and twisted forms remind me of another very special, legendary cutting weapon. If we recall the two treasures of Noklateo, the first was an object capable of cloning any weapon, including legendary ones. and the Eternal Cities are known to have forged a very special, legendary weapon indeed, one capable of slaying gods and whose copycat, or cloned creations, the Black Knives, which are described as oddly misshapen blades, were used to slay the Golden Bough after being imbued with destined death. If this is truly what these objects, these unwanted children of Marika, were used for, to create these blades of death in preparation for a generational plan many moons in the making, then perhaps they surrendered their bodies for the creation of these copycat weapons and the cause they would eventually be used for. After all, there are 7 mausoleums capable of copying weapons, 3 of these objects in the DLC, and a singular one in Nightreign totaling 11, and there are a total of 12 Black Knife assassins in the base game and DLC. I am discounting the ones from Nightreign as they very well may be one of the assassins from the base game or DLC, so including the original weapon being copied. That would make 12 Black Knives. Given we have a precedent of divine bodies being used to create legendary god-tier weapons in Radagon with the sacred relic greatsword, and in the misshapen Fingerslayer blade itself, the concept of these unwanted children being used to make blades capable of harming gods in a conspiracy is nothing short of tantalizing. As for the second treasure, if indeed the knight and wood folk are shaman derivatives, then that would mean they would be familiar with the rites of birth, spirit tuning, and the divine knowledge of soul manipulation. And we do indeed see this in the items associated with them. For example, the larval tier and cookbook explaining how to make food for spectral steeds found in the woodfolk ruins, and moonfolk and nightfolk sharing so much with the carrions who are positively coded to the core with birthing, children, and spirit magic. And that brings us to the second treasure of Noklateo, the blessing of the Shrouded City, capable of reviving one after death and bringing you back stronger than before for a short time. The process of rebirth, but with basically one for all, found underneath the crypt throne where we find the treasures of the other cities and the gloveworts used to comfort spirits. And this time, we find the treasure chest by an altar akin to the ones we see in all of the churches throughout the lands between Manus Celes and Volcano Manor, with its own unique floral design. And with this second treasure, the plan that would span many moons was made possible. The plan to cheat a god. For more context on the parties of this plan, see here. I believe there is a reason we see the same man on the stone ships, the ancient dynastic ruins, and the belfries that link the most important and iconic locations in the lands between. I believe there is a reason this exact same man is depicted no less than 8 times on a literal family Erdtree of himself, and why this figure was erased entirely from history without even a single mention, despite having more statues than Marika and Radagon combined. This is who I refer to as Fellden John, or in the terms of alchemy, the Red King. In alchemical texts, the Red or Solar King represents the divine masculine essence that undergoes death, dissolution, and rebirth. His essence is sometimes distilled and reborn in a new form, symbolizing transmutation of kingship and continuity of spiritual rule. This can be read as metaphysical succession, the king's essence purified and transferred. And I believe that is the entire point of the ritual from the DLC cinematic, what Marika interrupted and what this statue represents. In esoteric and alchemical texts, the alchemical king must often unite with the Black Queen, Lunar Maiden, or Sacred Bride, in a mystical death rebirth ritual. Her darkness isn't evil, it is the necessary shadow, the matter, the depth from which light is born. Depending on the text, sometimes she is dissolved, burned, or merged with him in the alchemical marriage, referred to as conjunctio. Her dissolution often represents the vessel in which the king's consciousness is reborn into purified form, or the philosopher's stone. However, I think just as some alchemical texts suggest, there is another element in this process, one that offers a new insight into the horror of the ritual, and that gives new profound meaning to the baby battery theories I have been playing with. While I intend to explore this much further in future videos, it is my thought that there is in fact a third participant within this rebirth ritual, and that is the unborn child carried by the female participant. I was won over by this interpretation when I realized that the figures we see in Enir Ilium in this ritual appear to bend in the same manner as the figures we see on the divine towers, stone coffin ships, and catacombs, and upon a further inspection of the image, I realized it very much looks similar to the godskin peeler and statue of Marika and Mesmer, like one of these figures is nursing a baby, or peering toward their womb. This is reinforced by the statues of the veiled woman we see in Elden Ring, linking her to the child-holding female as per the scavenger blade. The Rosarium Philosophorum, a pivotal alchemical treatise, contains a series of woodcut illustrations depicting the stages of the alchemical process. Notably, these images portray the king and queen's union and the subsequent emergence of a child, symbolizing the culmination of the great work. This sequence illustrates the transformation and rebirth inherent in alchemical practice, and I believe this is what is happening here: the rebirth of the Red King. In short, the Red King who symbolizes the egoic solar sulfuric masculine force must die, descending into the Black Queen, the unconscious feminine chaos, Negrito. She dissolves him, much like the god-slaying Black Flame, and this is the death of the old self. Through this dissolution, the Queen is transfigured into the White Queen, luminous, purified Mercury, the reflective soul. In their conjunctio, or sacred union, the King's essence enters her to gestate. The White Queen then becomes pregnant with his transformed spirit, and within her, the Filius Philosophorum, the Philosopher's Child, forms. And with that, the rebirth of the Red King is complete. And I believe this process is very similar to the Deathbed Maiden Fia's gestation of Godwyn into his new form, which would make the female participant in this ritual likely a Deathbed Maiden, or Deathbed Queen. Not only does this make the death veils on the statues make more sense, but this would also fall neatly in line with the depictions found in Ballarat and Ene Ilium of what I believe are deathbed maidens, and death's gentle helpers, as displayed once more on the winged scythe atop the very same bearded men. I think it was the perversion of this ritual that left Fellden John, the Red King, bodiless and formless and inhabiting any and every vessel he could to vie for control. I think this rebirth process was halted after the stage consisting of his dissolution. The divine knowledge of this ritual process and spiritual transfer was the secret weapon used by the Eternal Cities to pass down this generational plan across many moons, in response to their vision of the sin of the Erdtree. So, what was the sin of the Erdtree? I believe the Erdtree was the grand design of the Greater Will, as shown by the presence of trees at the center of all of the prior ruling civilizations we see with Fellden John at their center, in the ancient dynastic ruins, stone coffin ships, and all of the places linked by the belfries. I believe this process required immense sacrifice, absolutely enormous, generational amounts of death and souls, which is why we see colosseums and tourneys, as well as the markers and records of those fights, all throughout the lands between. And I think this process and the consequences of it were the sin perceived by the cutting-gifted tribe. And that was the coming rain. Many tree species emit volatile organic compounds, VOCs, particularly isoprene and monoterpenes, which play a complex role in atmospheric reactions. On their own, VOCs aren't acidic, but in the presence of nitrogen oxides, which can be caused in the correct conditions such as immense masses of corpses, and sunlight, they can promote the formation of ozone and aerosols in the lower atmosphere, or lead to the formation of organic acids and particulate matter that can acidify precipitation. These processes are especially relevant in forested areas near urban or industrial zones where nitrogen oxide emissions from cars or factories are present, and the industrial age equivalent of the lands between would be the Giant's Forge, art of smithing, and the Erdtree. Real examples of trees that emit high levels of VOCs include the eastern deciduous forests of the United States. These trees emit high levels of isoprene, particularly during warm sunny days. Eucalyptus forests in my own country. Eucalyptus trees, which we have covered here on this channel in previous videos, and their importance regarding fire and rebirth, emit large amounts of monoterpenes. These emissions are reactive and form organic aerosols in the presence of nitrous oxide, contributing to secondary organic aerosol formation, which can acidify rainwater if combined with acidic gases. boreal coniferous forests in Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia. These conifers emit monoterpenes and sesquiterpenes, which interact with ozone and nitrous oxides, leading to formation of low-volatility organic compounds that can contribute to acid rain via acidic aerosol formation. As for why the rain is blue, interestingly, the Blue Ridge Mountains appear blue in the distance due to the scattering of light by VOCs emitted from forests, mostly isoprene from oaks. So while VOC-emitting trees do not directly create acid rain, they enhance oxidation reactions in the atmosphere, support formation of aerosols and acids, and are important players in the natural background chemistry of acid deposition, especially in polluted environments like those polluted with putrescence and eternal decay. So now imagine that, but on a soul-processing continent-tier megatree network that spans the entire land. And now the acid rain may look a lot more real, deadly, and directly caused. I believe this is the sin of the Erdtree that the cutting-gifted tribe saw the future of. They saw the creation of this megastructure, this one great, as a threat to the day-night balance that would incite a cataclysm that would defile their sacred night, and replace it with a nightmare. And so they took to a generational plan that would take many moons to complete, in order to cheat a god. What better way to do this than with multiple blades capable of slaying the Greater Will and its vassals, and wield the sealed power of the Glomide Queen, with a plan that could be passed from one moon to another, becoming more powerful each time. I believe the final touch is the crescendo of this plan itself, which would be done out of the purview of the Greater Will, under the veil of an eclipse. This final piece is given to us in the very primordial rune we get from the Night Lord, which to me looks very much like an eclipse. If the sun was the apex of the age prior to the Erdtree, with that age's purpose being the foundation of the Great Tree network that would build the Erdtree, and the Erdtree is in function essentially replacing the sun, then I would wager depriving the Erdtree of the sun, and all of the denizens of the sun that rely on it to grow and prosper, would not only significantly weaken their enemy, but also veil their actions from the prying eyes and influence of the Greater Will, the eclipse that would bring an end to the Sun Realm and everything it existed to achieve. So what eclipsed the sun? Well, we have seen the attempt to create a starseed in the graven masses, sentient amalgamations of people with, I imagine, the intention of having a singular leading consciousness, as Selin attempted. And I think this knowledge, and the precedent for this, like much of the ancient magics adopted by the Carrions such as the Silver Ball Summon, the very spell they used to protect Celia, originated from the star-worshipping Eternal Cities, when they created their revered Darkmoon. And I believe, like the graven masses, this was done at the cost of their life. Fitting, given a moon is a celestial body, and the creation of a new god takes many sacrifices, as we see with Enir Ilim in an eerily similar fashion. A peerless observation made by the incredible Ooze, Prince of Death, is the Greatstar's Mace, which depicts the sun being eclipsed by 3 sister moons, each larger than the one before, as if stronger each time, like the favor of the Shrouded City's effect. I think this is symbolic of the eclipse created by the sacrifice of the 3 sister Eternal Cities, which would block out the sun so that the multi-generational plan could finally take place. This act of the moons eclipsing the sun would create the Bloodstar, a red star made from the eclipse caused by blood moons crafted by the people of the Eternal City. A blood star. This image in Renala's chambers and the debate hall may very well be a depiction of this very scene. Definitely check out Ooze's channel. He is preparing some amazing content to post, and I am very excited to see what he produces. The man has an excellent mind and brilliant eye. The fact this eclipse appears to be bleeding bounty and is resting on the shape of Marika's rune, akin to the grafting cut of the cutting-gifted tribe, ties in well with the fact the moon's an eclipse is made of the sacrifice of countless people. It also looks a lot like the Hammer of Marika, and what other tribe but the tribe with harmoniously melding flesh would be capable of grafting together such a thing. I believe this is why the Nox and Carrions are obsessed with the pooling of water, like a basin of shared memories, much like their dark moon, which would reflect on these basins of water. This reminds me of the basin of water we kneel in as we use Nox sacred water to wash away the memories of transgressions under a Nox statue. If the moon dictates the ebb and flow of the tide, and thus the movement of water, then the analogy would be the collective memory under the guidance of the Darkmoon. If the moons are the guides of the eternal cities, who are the sea of stars to the pull of the moon, then perhaps these throned women are the moons of the eternal cities. A new moon for a new age, and the next Red King. Either the entire city's sacrifice created the new moon, and the throned figure is the prime consciousness that would be the guide to the starseed, like Selene attempted, giving us the twin moons and the dark moon, which I believe is the black moon, which was damaged but not destroyed. I believe this moon to be the one we see at Rani's ending, the one she is taught to fear by the snowy crone, and the one that looks eerily like a black hole. Either way, this would be a nice play on the many moons of the Grand Conspiracy. If all of this was done for the eventual planned sacrifice of the Golden Bough with the Black Knives, then while the soul may be that of Wilder, I wonder if this vessel could perhaps be the malformed vessel of Godwyn after the successful death ritual in this timeline. After all, it was Godwyn's soul that was destroyed, leaving his body vacant. And while I have seen basilisks, and in the Shrouded City, I don't believe I have seen any death root with eyes throughout Nightreign, and Wilder's body is presumably in one of these 8 coffins, as explained in-game, while the Wilder we play as is his grace or soul, as also revealed in-game. His soul, which is transferred to this vacant vessel, a vessel much like the Black Knives, which were crafted to be vessels for destined death, though I am also satisfied with this lordly vessel being the body that would have been Radagon, given they host the Elden Ring in such a similar fashion and are both more material than biological. And that rune really does look like Marika's corpse, and by extension of this, another certain black blade imbued with destined death. But what it looks most in appearance like are the ruin fragments in Marika's hammer. I look forward to exploring the specifics with you in a future video, but for now there is much more Nightreign content to cover that I know will assuredly blow your minds. So stay tuned and don't forget to like, subscribe, share and abuse that bell so you don't miss my next public schizophrenic lore outburst. Thank you to the amazing Banuune for the incredible thumbnail and so much more. Thank you to my Patreon and YouTube members for your ongoing support and for enabling me.